Hi, I'm Jake. I'm the worship director here at Starting Line. I just want to welcome you to our online gathering that we have today. One of the cool things that we have at Starting Line Church is really practical ways to put our faith into action. And one of the things that we have coming up for that is a toy drive that we are partnering with the North Ridgeville Community Care Program. And so what that means is you can bring in unopened toys or non-perishable food items into the church. You can find a way to contact us if you never come in person. We want to find a way to be able to connect with you, even if you're an online only participant. So we just want to encourage you to find ways to continue to bring your faith into action, especially through this program that we have available. So I just want to invite you to worship with us in this time.
No pen or quill, no scribe in perfect skill. With flawless words could capture all you are. No lofty thought, no scholar of this world could grasp an inch of such infinity. Though we cannot comprehend such a mystery, just a glimpse of you revealed is compelling us to sing. Holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying. Worthy, worthy is your name. With hearts amazed and songs that never free, the fullness of your worth and majesty, we come again, yet fall on bended knee, yet here adore the God that we don't see. No, we cannot comprehend such a mystery, just a glimpse of you revealed is compelling us to sing. Holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying. Worthy, worthy is your name. When you return, we'll hear the trumpet sound. You'll lead us home, riding on the clouds, where we will stand and sing forevermore. The honor and praise, the glory is the Lord's. Holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying. Worthy, worthy is your name. Holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Worthy, worthy is your name. All of heaven joins the universe, ever crying. Worthy, worthy is your name. Worthy, worthy is your name.
Well, hey there, there, and welcome to Starting Line Church. My name is Al. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're really glad that you have joined us today, wherever you're watching from, at whatever time you're watching. This week, we're continuing our series called The Doubter's Guide to Jesus, where we've been exploring 7 different characteristics of Jesus so we can understand who he is on a deeper level. Because we've found that even though we like to put Jesus in a box, we can't do it because he's complex, he's multi-layered, he even causes tension sometimes. There's just so much to him. So far in our series, we've talked about the characteristics of Jesus that are powerful and majestic and really important. And today, we get to talk about something that is a little confusing. At least some people view it that way. Because it really isn't something that goes with all the others. Jesus as servant. When you think of servant, what do you think of? Maybe you think of a waiter at a restaurant. Maybe you think of a nurse or a firefighter. Maybe it's a certain personality or certain action that somebody does. Maybe you think of it in the context of doing something nice for a friend or helping the community or going on a mission trip. Or maybe it's just somebody that gives of themselves. The official definition of servant is a person who performs duties and services for other people. A devoted and helpful follower or supporter of someone else, lowering oneself. So when we think of servant, we think of someone whose job or responsibility is to do things for another person. And when putting all of that into the context of Jesus, in all of his glory, it seems a bit strange and out of place, doesn't it? There are even many people in this world and people that are part of other religions who can't wrap their head around the fact that if Jesus is God, how can he associate himself with servitude? While some see it as strange, I think it points to the very fact of what Christianity is, what makes Christianity so radical and attractive, that Jesus redefines what greatness is. To help us understand this better, we're going to be in Mark chapter 10, verses 35 through 45. It's now in the last week of Jesus' life, and something happens that gets him and his disciples talking about this idea of greatness. They're traveling, they're on the road, they're on their way to Jerusalem, and they're just reaching Jericho when 2 of his disciples kind of break out of the group because they have an important request for Jesus. The 2 that did were James and John, and they pulled Jesus aside and asked him a very burning question, something that they're really concerned about. Mark chapter 10, verses 35, starting at verse 35. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do us a favor." "What's your request?" Jesus asked. They replied, "When you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and one on your left." Okay, let's stop for a second. So basically here, they're saying, "Hey, Jesus, hey, we just want to ask, just kind of like we have a little favor. Just a little tiny one, right? Just a little tiny one. If it's not too much to ask, can we like kind of maybe sort of sit on the right and left of you when you get your throne someday? We kind of would just like to ask before anybody else does." What in the world is going on, right? Like, they're jockeying for position. They're trying to get a good spot. They're pushing other people out. I imagine like a facepalm right about now with Jesus, right? He's like, oh my gosh. Okay, let's keep reading. But Jesus said to them, "You don't know what you're asking. You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering that I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with?" "Oh yes," they replied, "we're able." Then Jesus told them, "You will indeed drink from my bitter cup and be baptized with my baptism of suffering, but I have no right to say that you will sit on my right or my left. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen. So Jesus here is communicating to them, do you have any idea what you're asking for? Because I don't think you do. You have no idea what's going to happen to me in Jerusalem. You have no idea what my death is going to look like in just a matter of a week. See, his disciples, they imagined a throne of some sort that Jesus was going to inherit here on earth. They imagined Jesus taking complete control and authority in the way that Rome controlled the area at the time. But that's not what was coming. Jesus is about to die a horrendous death on the cross for the sins of the world. So you want to be on my right and my left? You have no idea what that entails. And you still don't get it. So because of all this, because Jesus is going through this, he calls all of them in. He calls all the disciples in and says, okay, people, we have to have a conversation because you need help, right? You need direction yet again because you're confused. This is what happens. When the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant. So Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you, you will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. It's right here that Jesus is redefining greatness. What did James and John really want? What did the rest of them really want? Because if it wasn't James and John to ask, somebody else would have. They just beat him to the punch. They wanted to be known. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to be heard. They wanted respect and admiration and importance. They wanted to be the best. And all of that, all of those things can be summed up into they wanted to be great. They wanted to obtain greatness, but they're confused. They don't understand because the only example they have in front of them for greatness is Rome's power and authority. Rome was crippling people. They controlled people. They made people feel small. They were in charge and no one messed with them. Before Jesus' death and resurrection, the idea of greatness consists in humble service was not on religious radar, was not in the Egyptian mystery cults, the Greco-Roman religions, nor in Judaism. Nothing. So it's difficult to convey just how radical this notion would have seemed to the first disciples. But Jesus says, you will be different. In some translations of the Bible, it says, not so with you. You are not going to be like that. You will be different. Not so with you. You're not going to be great through arrogance and pride and acting like you're better than people or sitting on some throne. This is not the way of Jesus. You want to be great? Become a servant. You want to be great? Be humble in everything that you do. That's how you become great. We see here that Jesus calls his followers to humble servanthood. Now, that doesn't mean we get the lowest paying job or live on nothing or don't take care of ourselves. It means that whatever position or responsibility we rise to in life, we occupy it with a spirit of humble servanthood. And that's what we're going to break down today. Those two things, humility and servanthood. First, humility. The definition of humility is a modest or low view of one's own importance over another person's. Humility is not declaring or thinking that you're better than anybody else in any way. Humility is the opposite of pride. C.S. Lewis says this is a quote from him: pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person. we see divine humility when it comes to Jesus as servant. The night before Jesus was arrested and crucified, taken to be crucified, we find him washing his disciples' feet at the Last Supper, the last time he gathered together with his disciples. And this is such a radical idea, especially at this time, because washing feet was the job and responsibility that was reserved for servants and slaves. It was tradition that when people would come into someone's house, the servant would wash and clean everyone's feet. And I don't know about you people, but I do not like feet, like at all. Okay? I don't even like my own feet. I wear socks all the time because of it. Now, what we have to understand is that back in this day, there was no transportation, so people walked everywhere. There was no fancy, cool shoes to cover their feet. They wore sandals. There were no nicely paved roads with a yellow line down the middle of it. Instead, there were dirt roads. All of this to say, with all of those factors, these feet weren't like the feet today. So this job, to me, sounds terrible, right? But in humility, Jesus says, why is this job reserved for slaves and servants? Shouldn't we just be serving each other because it's how we show God's love to others? Imagine observing the one you revered as the epitome of greatness, taking off his robe, tying a towel around his waist, and doing for you what you had previously only ever seen a slave do for his master. Without obligation, without gimmick, without complaining, he washes and dries nasty feet. I don't know about you, but I would feel humbled by that. But the washing of the disciples' feet was a greater example of the Christian life itself. That we are to walk in humility regardless of the situation, never putting anyone lower or not as good as we are. Now, this doesn't mean we have to take the lowest paying job or not being able to, support ourselves, but it does mean that we can never have the attitude that we are too good for something or someone else. Jeff Mannion, from the lead pastor at Ada Bible Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, he says this regarding this topic. Humility is not the absence of power and position. Humility is holding your power and position in the service of others. Humility is not the absence of authority, it's using your authority in the service of others. Number 2. Servanthood. Humility and servanthood. Think about it. A majestic God, by definition, typically excludes any notion of weakness. Servanthood, lowering oneself for the sake of somebody else, it pretty much excludes all of that. But Christ's definition of God's majesty consisted precisely in the Creator's willingness to serve His creation. In the book of Philippians, it refers to Jesus as being in very nature God and taking the very nature of a servant. There's an acknowledgement that Jesus is Lord over all and the one before whom every knee will bow someday. But we also see him revealed as a servant, willing to put humanity's good before his own glory and fame. This parallel is deliberate and striking because the phrases are so different from one another, used in the same passage. In the original Greek language, what the New Testament was written in, there are 2 words used for servant. One refers to the servant with rights, and the other to the servant without rights. The second one, without rights, is usually translated to slave. And so in this term, used in the passage I was describing, it can be explained, made himself nothing, suggests that we need to give the term its full weight. God in Christ became a slave. Jesus calls us to give of ourselves, to put others before ourselves, serve the people around us, our friends, our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, work for the people who work for us, help people who don't deserve it, serve in ways you like and in ways that you don't. And when you do this, take on the heart and the spirit that Jesus has doing it. Because it's possible to serve and show up with a stinky attitude. It's possible to serve and show up and be self-absorbed and make it all about you. But serving like Christ is about putting aside all of our preferences, all of our opinions, for the sake of serving others because of Jesus' love for them. If the highest Lord won his greatest achievement on a shameful cross, where he gave his life as a sacrifice for the entire world, even people who would reject him repeatedly, what else could it imply? That true glory comes through humble service. We're called to this as well, to occupy a spirit of humble servanthood in all that we do, to model the servant we see in Jesus, our Lord. How can we serve others around us and have a spirit of humble servanthood like Jesus? I want to give us 3 ways that we can do this specifically in the weeks to come. Obviously, these will not teach us to have the right heart and attitude, but there are practical ways that we can serve others. Number 1, serve our relationships. Regardless of who we are, we have people in our lives. Those relationships look different from person to person, depending on who makes up their families, their friends, their coworkers, their neighbors, but we all have individual people that we can serve in specific ways. So what are some ways that you can serve people in your life this week? The relationships that God has blessed you with. Maybe it's making dinner for your family without being asked. Maybe it's writing someone a letter. Maybe it's doing something nice and unexpected for your neighbor. Maybe it's not grumbling and complaining when somebody asks you to do something or help them. Maybe it's helping a coworker at work when you really don't have to. Serve our relationships. Number 2, serve our church. Even though we as Starting Line are a very new church, there are ways that we can practice serving right now here at Starting Line. We have ways that you can get involved on Sunday mornings or during the week, or even people that are watching online that you can serve in different capacities. We have opportunities for you to serve by giving of your time and your energy and your money and your talents and all kinds of things. We are called to serve the local churches that we're part of. Serve our church. And number 3, serve our community. We're called to not just serve the people that we're closest to and that we really know well, but we have a responsibility to serve our community and to care for those around us. Here at Starting Line Church, we partner with 2 community organizations here in North Ridgeville. North Ridgeville Community Care and the North Ridgeville City Schools. If you want to get involved or know more about those ways that you can do that, we have 2 opportunities for you right here, right now. The first one is what we talked about at the beginning, participating in the toy drive and non-perishable food drive for North Ridgeville Community Care. That's happening the whole month of November, so if you want to get involved in that, whether you're here in Cleveland or not, you can. So let us know if you want to get involved in that, or if you're here in the Cleveland area, bring those things to our gatherings on Sunday mornings at the school. And the second one is we have the really cool opportunity of participating in kindergarten recess and lunch. We are volunteers. Starting Line Church are volunteers that we get to go in during the week to be with kindergartners, to hang out with them, and just to see how we can serve the teachers and the schools and the families. So we do that. Typically we do it every Thursday, but there's opportunities to do it every day of the week, really just whatever works for your schedule. So if that interests you, let us know, get a hold of us. We'd love to plug you in to serving our community as well. Serving our relationships, serving our church, serving our community. Let's model the life of Jesus. Let's do this together. We are excited for what's to come, and just seeing how that spirit of humble servanthood will impact our days. So thanks for joining us this morning or today or whenever you're watching. We're excited that you have joined us. Stay on. If you have kids, we have Starting Line Kids here happening soon, so you can hop onto that. But if not, have a fabulous week, and we will see you next week.